Oh, I just realized that my laundry's hanging there as I pressed record. Yes, this is one of the places where I dry some of my laundry. The other is right over there. There's another pole with curtains over there. I have a washer, but not a dryer. Okay. Those are actually probably dry, and I could have taken them down easily before I pressed record. But I just rushed over here because I was on Instagram and just about to be done with it. And I come across this. Okay, so this is on Tier Chronicles is the page, but so just to give them credit, I guess. This is what it is. Oh, hold on. I don't want to get copyrighted. Okay. Hold on. You see this? There's a person saving a child who's run out into traffic, right? Probably not their kid. And if you watched my video yesterday, which video was it? It was called The Difference Between Sovereignty and Selfishness, yada yada. I used an example, I said something in there about how we should be like hands off with people. Unless it's children, we should protect children. Like if a child's going to get hit by a car, then we need to step in. And so here it is in my feed, right? The next day. I manifested that, right? I lined myself up with that by speaking that, you see? And so I was just like, oh, I need to talk about this. And then that Metallica song came into my mind, King Nothing. Careful what you wish, careful what you say. Careful what you wish, you might regret it. Careful what you wish, you just might get it. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. Like, careful what you wish for. It's it's a very valid thing, right? And sometimes it's like what we wish for, we could consciously be wishing for something, but that in our subconscious, buried down in there, the stuff that we haven't paid attention to for a while, is in fear in some way, or is against it, or doesn't feel we're worthy of it, or, is afraid of rejection, or is afraid of our own success. And that part will sabotage us, or make us line up with something that makes it so we don't get the thing, right? It depends on what vibration is stronger within us. So an example is the other day, I was talking about, which video was this? I can barely remember what I've named my videos. I'm just going to pull up YouTube and tell you. The other day, the video was Alchemy reading 7.2. What was I saying? Releasing the feeling of not living up to expectations. That's the talk I said this in? Okay. So what I was saying was how I was in fear of letting go of my belongings because I was scared that once I let it go, that I would need it. So because of that, when I did let some stuff go, I was then faced with a situation where I needed it. Like I manifested that. And that was because I had a fear. So I just kind of want to say, like, when we get really clear, like I've cleared up all that backlog of stuff. Now, like, it's very easy for me to see that I am manifesting this. I am the one lining up with the reality that I'm in. I'm creating the reality I live. I really, really am. And yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I really want to be careful with how I word things and get out of habits, right? In yesterday's video, the Alchemy reading number 9, difference between sovereignty and selfishness. In that reading, I did talk about how, let's see, what did I do? Oh no, here's what it was. I kept having these moments where like a thought of fear would come up, or it was actually like a habit of fear. Because this is what I realized about it. So a couple times in the video number 9, I was like thinking, oh, I don't want to post this because people will think I'm crazy, or I don't want to undo all the stuff that I already did to be very practical, or I'm worried that you'll think that I'm trying to preach, right? Those are 3 examples that came up in that video where I had to correct myself. Like at one point I was even going to stop the video and start recording all over again to like leave out the crazy story, I guess. And then I stopped myself because I took a moment and I was just like, oh, there's nothing behind that, and I just moved on. But in retrospect, what that was, that moment where I was like, oh, I'm just going to stop this and start again. And then there was a pause, and then I go, no, I'll just leave it. And what it is that was just a habit. I was just about to fall into a habit, but there was nothing there for it to be in anymore. Because in the video before it, Alchemy reading 7.2, I had cleaned up the fear of not living up to others' expectations. So I had alchemized that already. And in Alchemy number 9, you could see me like identifying a bunch of the habits of doing so. It was very interesting for me in retrospect to look at that. I was like, oh, between Alchemy reading number 7.2 and 9, there were 4 days. About 3 or 4 days. And in those 3 or 4 days, the time I healed it to the day that I did the next recording, those were the days that I was integrating the changes, right? So I hadn't really noticed any differences during that time, probably because I didn't really interact with a whole heck of a lot of people that would make me self-conscious. And I hadn't made a recording, which has the potential to make me self-conscious. So it didn't come up until I was recording. Then I was self-conscious. Then those habits kind of came up, but it was because they're habits of my mind to kind of direct me in that way. But then there was nothing kind of below them, right? Because you saw me like push past all those things. Like, oh, people might think I'm crazy. Or, oh, maybe I should redo this and not have that story in it. Or, oh, people might think I'm preaching. Preaching anyway. And I think that the proof is in the pudding, in that if I had done those things, pushed through, right, and did them anyway, and then afterwards I had discomfort. Like afterwards I was worried, I was like stressed out, I was like, oh, are they really going to think I'm crazy? Should I take that down? These are thoughts that I used to have, like back when I first started posting on this channel. There are lots and lots and lots of videos over the years that I just didn't post, that I recorded, and then I just thought, I'm not posting that. There are lots of them. And then there are a couple handfuls that I posted and then later made invisible to public. So there's been a lot of that in the past where I got the feelings afterwards of like doom, or did I do that, or questioning, or fear, right? That was the fear of not living up to other people's expectations. And that haunted me for all those years up until Alchemy reading 7.2, where I released like a really deep layer of it anyway. And now in Alchemy reading number 9, what I'm saying is that even though like the things came up as a habit, I pushed through. I didn't like have to change my behavior. I just had to like notice that that was a thought and then like let that go. There was nothing like the fear wasn't behind it driving it anymore. So I was able to like move past it. And then even in retrospect, I had no ill feelings about it. So I just wanted to point that out. But back to the original topic here of, it matters what we say. We are creating this reality. And sometimes there's a bigger buffer between you realizing your creation. And sometimes there's so much resistance and so much energy towards it that it balances itself out where it just won't show up, because it's like it's like, well, which is it? Which is it? Do you want it or do you not want it? And here's another place where we find out that in life, our decisions are so important. What we decide dictates. Like, do you decide you want it or do you decide you don't want it? Which is it going to be? Because that's going to dictate the timeline that you are on. And that's going to dictate what you live out. So there have been times in my path where I was faced with decisions like, do you want it or not? Like, finding out what you really want is an important part of this whole thing, right? Sometimes we find out what we want by knowing what we don't want. But does it always have to be that way on every topic? No. It's kind of the rough way to go about it sometimes. Can you just decide what you want? There were actually some friendships in my life where I was like teetering with, like, do I trust this person? Do I not trust this person? I'm not really sure. I can't, this person's vibration could go either way. I could feel that, right? And then I had to come to a point where it's like, okay, well, decide what I want to do here. Do I want to let them in as a friend and then, risk being hurt, but, you can handle being hurt, so you'll be okay eventually. Or do I want to just, not have them as a friend? I can't just keep it in the middle here. I had to make a decision, right? So that was a nicer thing to be faced with than the idea that I'm just leaving behind friendships as a coping mechanism because I don't have the skills to navigate it, or I'm too fearful for even looking at it. When I came to a point where I was actually discerning, and I was like, oh, I do have a choice here. And to be honest, the choice dictates a lot of times what we experience with that person, right? Because you can probably think of a person that when you deal with them, even if they don't say anything, if they're in a mood. If they're angry with you, that if they're angry in general, if they're in anxiety, you know what I mean? You can just feel these things. And so we should give people credit to know that however we're feeling about them, it affects how they act towards us. Big time. Hugely. And I think this is why I've been in the habit of holding my children in the highest light. When I learned this kind of thing, I was just like, oh yeah, well, I want to hold the space for my child to show up in his highest version. So, I'm always going to return to that no matter what. And we've come a long way that way. It's been really effective. And it has shown me that I do have unconditional love for my children, which, yay. I think that's how it should be. If anyone's going to love you unconditionally, it should be your mother, don't you think? And not all of our mothers can do that, and that's okay too. But I want to be at least that, as much as I've failed as a mother over the years, I want to be at least a mother who can love my child unconditionally. So they can fuck up, or they can make choices that cause themselves hindrance, or they can, commit crime, or they can, not feel their best, or they can do whatever they do. And I will always, always, always have a space for them in my heart. And I hold them knowing that they can get to the place where they need to be, where they can honor themselves and know their love and God's love. And I just hold that as like this, so I'm never going to hold grudges against my kids or wish that they lived up to my expectations, or be attached to some outcome, because I know that God took me through a path, and I wouldn't have maybe like chosen that path from within the path, but I know that it got me to here, and I know that there were times where it was really, really scary, and I didn't think I would make it, but I made it. So I believe that that's true for my kids too, on whatever path they're on. Yeah, I just wanted to share those things that I had thought of since the last couple readings. What else? All right, here's a topic. Why do people say don't cry? You know how I saw this on a video the other day. Okay, so there's a vlogger that I watch. A nice, I say nice family, but like what's nice, right? This family is like a girl. She lives in Thailand, and then her mother and sister and the rest of her family live in the United States. And she was visiting from Thailand, where she was living for the past 8 years, visiting her family. But while she was there, her mother had a, let's not talk about it, specifics, okay? Let's not talk about details. Her mother had come down with a pretty severe condition. So then they end up, because the mother has been in her vlogs before, and because the mother has another daughter who also has a vlog channel who she's featured in often. So they have a following. They have people who tune into their lives. So they make a video explaining what has happened, what condition, and the events leading up to it and so forth. And then one of the daughters starts crying, and the mother says, "Don't cry, don't cry." And the daughter's like wiping her tears fiercely, and she's like, I know, I'm trying not to cry, you know? And I was just like thinking, what came to mind? That meme. I don't know who wrote this quote. Let's see if there's credit to give on this quote. Hold on, I suddenly got dyslexia. Dyslexia, by the way, is an indication of a genius mind that cannot be stuffed in a box. Just saying. Okay. Okay, it's saying Google is crediting the quote to Charlotte Bronte. I don't know if she's really the first one that said it, but it says, crying does not indicate that you are weak. Since birth, it has always been a sign that you are alive. Right? And given what I know about moving emotion and feelings that are lodged in us and stuck and that have been unprocessed or repressed or suppressed, given what I know about repression and suppression and how it harms us and actually makes us live out a program of, looping energy that can eventually manifest in illness. Of course, and knowing that tears actually is a way to move energy of the emotional sort, I, of course, condone crying. I think it's important. I think it's a unfortunate thing that we have led certain members of our population, like men, we've led them to believe that it was not okay to cry, that it wasn't manly to cry, that it was weak. And it's not. It's not at all. It's human. So why would we indicate to our men that they can't be human? And why would men indicate to other men that they can't be human? And why would mothers tell their daughters not to cry when your mother is critically ill? We need to be able to move emotion, and laughter is one way to move it, but also tears. It's energy. It has to move, and if tears come, it's like your emotion is moving on a wave. It's a beautiful way to let the emotion come out, because if you add water, it's like lubrication, and if you can lubricate the emotion on its way out, it's just going to come out that much easier. And if you're trying to stifle and stop your tears, it's the same thing as stifling and stopping your emotions. And we get uncomfortable. So let's look at this. Why are we getting uncomfortable when people cry? Besides the thing where we've told men that it's a sign that they're weak, it could just be that, we do live among some people who are coping narcissistically and who may want to take advantage of our emotions, right? Our emotions is a lot of times what's manipulated, coerced, and abused when we are dealing with people who are coping in narcissistic ways. So if they know something that we feel strongly about, or something that moves us to our core so much as to bring tears, they can use that information to further manipulate and coerce us. That is possible. So it may be one way that we just associate vulnerability and weakness with it, right? It could be that. It could be that we grew up in a household where, it just wasn't welcomed. It was uncomfortable for people, and so they didn't want you to cry because they had not dealt with their emotions, so they were passing that along to you by saying, no, we don't do that. And sometimes when you're in like a business setting or a professional setting, maybe even a public setting like a store, like maybe that's not the place where you want to have your all-out, emotional outburst or whatever, right? I get that, like, if you're doing a business deal, or if you're in front of a judge, for instance, and you're trying to prove your competence, then having uncontrollable emotional outburst is inconvenient. And it's understandable then that we have developed the skill as humans to be able to stifle our cries. But in these cases, I hope that we know that it's appropriate then to go back to that pain when we are in a comfortable space, we're in a safe space, we can process it through. Like if we stifle it indefinitely, then it becomes one of those things that's looming in the back, just ready to pounce out, or ready to give us pressure, or ready to make us feel bad about ourselves, or give us anxiety, or give us depression, or bring us down with an illness. So it's unfortunate when we have people who are just in the habit. It's just a habit, and it's just passed along for the most part. Trying to let us feel like we shouldn't be crying. Crying's really, really important. It's really, really good to cry. I mean, if you're crying all day, every day for a long time and it just won't stop, I get why that's like, damn, I don't know if there are any medical ailments and illnesses that are associated with those symptoms. So by all means, I'm not, in a position to do diagnosis or strategize care for anything like that. So please do get professional help in cases where it's needed. But sometimes it's just like you have that much backlog of emotion that's unprocessed. So it's going to take a bit for you to sit with it. And when you start sitting with it, sometimes more goes, well, my turn, my turn, my turn, Like I've talked before in other videos about how I spent a couple months getting in the bathtub, for hours a day, a few times a day even, and just letting myself cry. And I'm very fortunate that I had the ability to do that, the time to do that, the space to do that. I had a beautiful porcelain purple bathtub that I miss so much. So much. But like, I get it. Like, there was a lot of tears during that time for me. But there had never been a time where I just allowed my tears to come. But prior to that, and I was at least 40. How old was I? I was at least 40. I was older than 40. 42, something like that. So 42 years of tears, you know. I probably had cried plenty, through my life, but never in a way where it was comfortable and honored and allowed and accepted. Because I too got that programming, especially like if our mothers jump to try to make us stop crying, or if we get yelled at to stop crying. I think that would be something more like my father would have done. My father would have yelled at us to stop crying. Oh yeah, because I can remember I'll give you something to cry about. Have you ever heard that? I did. And I was given things to cry about. One of the punishments that I used to get was pants pulled down and belt across my bare ass while I was strewn on my father's lap. So, looking back on this, I'm just like, what could I possibly have done that was that bad at 5 years old? What could I possibly have done to elicit that from an adult at 5 years old, right? But obviously my father had programs of anger and violence from his own childhood and his own experiences of being treated that way, and they were being passed along to me. And it's unconsciousness that does that, right? So, and if that came from me having a whining fit, a crying fit, right? Whatever made me cry, maybe as a child, it's like you're dysregulated, especially in a home like that. And if you can't regulate your own tears, no one's teaching you how. So if I cried and I couldn't stop crying and it was making people uncomfortable, so uncomfortable that they would beat me for it, you could see why, like, the rest of my life I would be like, yeah, I don't really want to, like, spend a lot of time crying here. Until I finally did, until I finally let myself, until I finally said, oh, I'm a human and I'm not going to stifle this human process of crying. It's very natural. It kind of reminds me of what we've done with women and their menstrual cycle in some cases, where we have put shame around it for them. Girls, when they get their periods, at least when I went to school, it was something that was like, you do not want anyone to know this. And you do not want anyone to see any of your personal hygiene products, tampons or pads. Should not be seen. Even if they're clean. This needs to be very much hidden, right? They even used to do commercials about how Tampax was so compact you could, like, hide it easily. They built shame into the whole thing. So, as a young girl being impressionable about the whole thing, it's like giving the impression that I should be hiding this. But it's true, and it's me, and I'm having this experience of bleeding, and I need these products to keep clean. So why is it shameful? Why is it shameful? It's a beautiful thing, actually. The process of menstruating is the same process associated with staying ready and fertile, for being impregnated and giving birth. It's actually a miracle. So it's like the prelude to a miracle is being shamed in us. And tears are being shamed in us. And emotions, in some case, like in our male population, has been shamed in them. And it's interesting because it's like, if we look at it, this shame, this idea of putting shame on another, it's manipulation. It's using this low vibrating emotion, or feeling rather. This low vibrating feeling is being used to control people, to put them in fear, and to influence their behaviors. And I believe it's backfiring. It's backfired, guys. Further, we have industrialized the whole birthing process. And lots and lots and lots of babies have been imprinted, right? Mammals. We are mammals. So our babies are mammals. And something we know about mammals is the offspring imprint on their mother when they're born. And we have lots and lots of babies that were born and not put right with their mother, but instead put into a plastic bin where they were suctioned and rubbed down and stuff put in their eyes. Some of them, if we go way back, were hung upside down and spanked. Like, that's some crazy shit to let a whole generation of babies imprint on. And then we wonder why people's hearts are closed. It's like, oh, industrializing the birthing process. I mean, of course, I appreciate that there are hospitals and there are doctors who have learned about and specialized in, assisting a woman to give birth. But I don't particularly appreciate that it's done with such sterility. You're like, yes, I want a sterile environment, but I mean like some doctors are like doing it like they're robots. They're not really invested in it. Personally, I had midwives when I gave birth for both pregnancies. I had midwives. And I had a single child when I was 20. And then 2 years later, I had my twins. And my twins was the first time that my midwife was allowed to deliver twins, because that hospital did not allow midwives to deliver twins. And my twins were a surprise. We did not know I was having twins because they were midwives. They were conscious of the fact that doing all these scans and running like infrared whatevers into the womb, why would we do that? Unnecessarily, I do get that there have been advancements in technology, and also there are conditions of the fetus that doctors want to be prepared for, so they are scanning for these reasons. I get that. But then there are some unnecessary things, and I don't know if there are detrimental effects. But at that time, err on the side of caution. They did. We didn't do ultrasounds unless there was an issue. They would listen to the heartbeat of my second pregnancy there, but never did they hear 3 heartbeats. So after I gave birth to the first baby, which was Kaplan, my son Kaplan, then half an hour later, 30 minutes later, we got Harley. And I didn't actually give them names right away because I only had one name picked out. And so when there was 2, I was like, oh, now we have to pick another name. And I waited until we decided on another name to give them both their names. So at first, for the first day, there were Twin A and Twin B. And complete surprise. I did not know it, didn't prepare for it, but it came together just fine. Our family kind of stepped up and gave us things that we needed, 2 of that we only had 1 of. And it worked out just fine. But but anyway, one thing that happened there during those births is circumcision. I don't want to violate my children's privacy, but I do want to talk about this topic in that I was just like a young girl, 20, for my first one and 22 for my second one. So I didn't know anything about anything, especially circumcisions. I had a brother. I have no idea about his condition, actually. And all I knew was that I was offered a circumcision for my sons, and it was my decision. And it was a yes or a no, and that was it. Like, there was no information about why or why not. It was literally just an arbitrary choice. Like that. It was just like that. I mean, there was no guidance given. I had no conscious awareness of why or why not. So the only thing I had to go by was, oh, their father is circumcised, so I guess they should be circumcised. What a completely ridiculous, wrong thing to make a decision by, right? Like, but at that time, that's where my consciousness was. I didn't know. I had just given birth. I was recovering. There's a reason that you stay in the hospital usually. Not all women have to stay in the hospital a day or two after the birth, but I did. And, because, it depends on like stitches and how you can care for it and all that kind of stuff. If you have whatever your body needs to do to recover. My body needed to recover. And it was probably because, even though I wasn't as heavy as I am now back then, it was probably because I did carry extra weight as a thing. Anyway. So anyways, the decision that I made would not be the decision I would make today. Just think about this. So there are doctors, yes, that specialize in birth, and they study it, and they learn about it, and they help assist us. That's great. And then there are doctors that study and specialize and practice in cutting off the foreskin of a male's penis. And that's their whole job. They've made a career out of it. They get paid for it. And it's literally an arbitrary decision made by a mother who is wary and potentially not informed. What a racket. And there have been a lot of, I think, kind of common sense of observations of babies that have this procedure done. Yes, some babies lose their lives through the procedure. Some babies actually have a hard time latching on to the breast to feed after these procedures. It's a trauma. It's a trauma. Anyone knows it's a trauma if you're conscious, right? But I knew it was a trauma after it was done. I knew it was a trauma then because when I was brought back my baby and they were noticeably upset and noticeably needed comfort and noticeably had been crying loudly, screeching in pain, And, I just wish that I had been conscious enough to understand that, that is genital mutilation that I consented to. Why? Because a doctor has to make a living and he made that his job. Simply that. Literally simply that. And why is that being let into our hospitals? Why is that part of the industrialization of the birthing process? Why are there doctors that have made their careers making money on mutilating genitals? I don't like it. I think it's unfortunate, and I hope that we can grow out of it. Another thing about, the way we've done with babies in my lifetime, I've seen recently a vlogger that I watch. I've seen her commenters talk about the Ferber method. They're suggesting using the Ferber method. And I'm just thinking, what? I thought we understood the Ferber method was crap. How are there people still thinking, people who are, good people wanting to be good parents. They're not wanting to torture or harm their children. They want to do the right thing. Yet, this one doctor, Dr. Ferber, came up with this method of training a child, which is to allow them to cry, which in turn causes this dysfunction in emotion, right? Because what is supposed to happen when a baby is crying? The parent is supposed to comfort them. They're supposed to be regulated by the regulatory system of the mother. Now, why are these babies crying uncontrollably? Because the mothers are not regulated, because the fathers are not regulated, because it's been a passed down issue. So if the mother's not regulated, then the baby is not being regulated by the mother, right? So that is why the baby is never stopped crying, and that is why this Dr. Ferber is actually causing more harm than good. Because instead of offering the idea that we should kind of like cold shoulder our babies so they can cope with the idea that they're not going to get regulated, like leaving an infant to figure it out on their own is going to cause trauma, okay? But what really needs to happen is mothers need to learn to be emotionally regulated. We could curb this issue by teaching mothers who are pregnant. All the mothers who are pregnant could go through, could be offered an emotional regulation course. Could be given information about emotional regulation and what dysregulation looks like, so that they can identify if they are having an issue and what they can do to work on, and give them resources and tools so that we can stop passing along this issue to our children right down to infancy, because as you know, the method that we use is we identify something and then we validate it. Well, there's no validating stuff when we're an infant. Usually we won't even have memories back that far of any conclusions that we made. It's primal back then. It's primal that baby will suppress or repress emotions, or just give up on thinking that they're important enough to care for. It's being programmed into an infant that they're not worth being cared for. That's dangerous. And then, the kid grows up and has issues, and the parents are all like, well, I don't know, I did my best, and they've never been neglected or mistreated. It's like, oh, but they did the Ferber method. Oops. That doctor, I'm sure maybe meant well, but it's a crime that information is being passed along to parents who mean well, who are desperate to understand what to do with a baby who will just not settle. It's like, oh, regulate yourself. Regulate yourself. The baby will regulate off of your regulation. They're designed that way. That's why they've imprinted on you. Oh, the baby's not imprinted on you because it was put in a plastic bin first. Oh, yeah, we got some issues. This is why we really need to look at kind of these kind of things, because we can stop a lot of the issues that don't surface until much later if we just are informed, if we know what's causing the issues later. But when we look at an industry, like why is this industry gonna tell on themselves? Oh, well, the problem is in our industry that we're making money off of. Oh, the thousands of dollars that you paid us to facilitate your birthing process. Yeah, we don't want to lose that, so we're not going to let you know that it's not the best and highest good for you and your baby. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Oh, yeah, my summer home that I'm trying to get, even though my job is just mutilating genitals, I'd still like to get it, so, I need a few more to do, so, the choice is yours. Yeah, people need to be informed about what these decisions mean and what they can lead to. It's unfortunate that hasn't been the case. So do you want to join me in writing a wish for the clearing of these type programs? May people be informed and understand the methods that are in their highest good and the highest good of all. May the systems that are currently in place that are causing more harm to people be crumbled in the most caring and efficient way without causing detriment or harm to anybody in the process. Now, I know this includes a lot of jobs, and people need jobs because they have families too, and they have to support them. This is a tricky thing, but divine can orchestrate this, and I just don't want to talk all about it without putting something into the universe of what I actually prefer, which is for things to change, but in the highest good of all, you know? Like, I'm not saying let's, punish all the doctors or anything like that, I'm just noticing, things that have happened in our society that we could improve upon if we could just inform people. And there are people out there talking about stuff like this. There are. It's just that it's not popular. And it's just like, it's not the people who have all the money talking about it, because the people that have all the money because of the people who are buying. So the people who are talking about it, they don't have as many resources in some cases. And then there's the idea that, like, probably this percentage of the population doesn't even want to hear about it. Because if you've already made the decision to circumcise your child, do you really want to learn that it was the wrong thing to do? It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to learn that. If you've already ferberized your child, do you really want to learn that that was a terrible thing to do? You probably don't want to. It doesn't feel good. You're going to feel some things about it, and they're not going to be pleasant to feel. So we need people to be a lot more brave about looking at the knowledge and not sweeping under the carpet and not pretending that it would be better to just not look at it, And, I just got this thought of, like, okay, well, let's just, like, my whole point now that we've talked about all this is, like, can you join me? Would you like to join me in just holding space for the highest outcome on these topics for all people involved in it? That the information that they need would be offered and presented to them in a way that they can assimilate it when it is in their highest good and the highest good of all. And so it is. And so just like I hold my children in the high regard and know that they're on their path and that they can handle what comes their way, and that, they're capable of lining up with their highest path, I want to do that for everybody, especially all the people that I've just referenced in any situations tied to the topics that I've talked about and identified in this ramble. And I guess that's what this is, a ramble. I'm going to end it there.